picture a boardroom. You walk in, and even though there are plenty of seats right in the middle where all the action is, you just immediately gravitate toward a chair near the door.
Right, the classic back row safety move.
Exactly. And the meeting starts, and you have a genuinely good idea, something you've spent the entire weekend refining, right? But when you finally open your mouth, what actually comes out is, this might be a silly idea, but...
A little painful, yeah.
And then halfway through explaining it, a colleague interrupts you, and you just instantly stop talking.
You just yield the floor entirely.
Right. You just give it up. And when they eventually loop back and acknowledge your point, thanking you for the strategy, you reflexively wave your hand and say, oh, it was really a team effort.
Totally dismissing your own work.
Yep.
Then you get in your car to drive home, and there is this feeling sitting heavy in your chest. It's not quite anger, it's not sadness. It's just a vague, unnameable, hollow frustration, a sense that something important just slipped right through your fingers. So, okay, let's unpack this. Have you ever walked out of a room feeling that exact same frustration?
I mean, I think most of us have. And that hollow feeling, it actually has a name. It is your own agency, your own power slipping away. And what makes it so incredibly frustrating is that you didn't lose it in some dramatic showdown or, a high-stakes argument.
But nobody yelled at you.
Exactly. You gave it away incrementally in one small act of shrinking at a time.
Which is exactly why we are taking a deep dive today into a specific excerpt from Chapter 8 of The Mistakes Women Make That Are Holding Them Back. Our mission today is to look right at these invisible, quiet acts of self-erasure. We are going to map out what shrinking actually looks like in practice, uncover the deeply wired neurological and social reasons we do it.
And those reasons are fascinating, by the way. Oh, absolutely wild. And most importantly, we want you to walk away with the specific, actionable steps to reclaim that space. Because there's a premise early in the source material that just sets the stakes perfectly. It says, every time you make yourself smaller to make someone else comfortable, you are not being kind. You are being complicit in your own erasure.
Wow. That directly challenges how we usually frame these behaviors to ourselves, doesn't it? Because we rationalize. We say, oh, well, I'm just being polite. Or I'm highly collaborative. I'm trying to be a team player.
Right. We dress it up as a virtue.
We do. But shrinking rarely announces itself dramatically. It lives entirely in the micro moments. It's a pattern of systematic self-diminishment made up of tiny, accumulated choices. And those choices, they don't just shape how the room perceives your competence. They physically and psychologically shape how you eventually see yourself.
Okay, so let's get into the actual anatomy of shrinking, the concrete, microscopic ways it happens in everyday life, because the research lays out a really fascinating and honestly slightly uncomfortable taxonomy of specific behaviors.
Oh yeah, prepare to feel a little cold out here.
Yeah, seriously. As we go through these, I want you listening to see how many of these live in your daily routine. So first up is the apology reflex. This isn't apologizing because you spilled coffee on someone.
Right, not a real apology.
No. This is starting a sentence with, sorry, but, before expressing a perfectly valid professional opinion. It's apologizing for your own existence in a space you were explicitly invited to occupy.
And right next to that is the qualifier spiral. This is the language of preemptive hesitation. So, prefacing a brilliant strategy with, I might be wrong, but I'm not sure if this makes sense.
Oh, or the classic, just a quick thought. I hear that one all the time.
Yes, just a quick thought. And the psychology here is essentially preemptive appeasement. The idea is if you lower the room's expectations before you speak, you protect yourself from criticism. But the mechanism backfires completely.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Using these qualifiers is like handing the jury a list of reasons to acquit the defendant before you've even presented your evidence.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
You are literally doing the opposition's job for them. You're casting the first ballot against yourself publicly. It's like slapping a vote of no confidence bumper sticker on your own idea before anyone else even gets to weigh in.
What's fascinating here is the linguistics research that backs this up. Studies on professional perception consistently show that hedging language, so these apologies and softeners we're talking about, they drastically reduce how credible, competent, and leadership-ready a speaker is perceived to be.
Wait, really? It's that measurable?
Oh, absolutely measurable. And it's not about projecting a cold or aggressive persona. It's understanding that the language of self-doubt literally trains the human brain of everyone in that room to doubt you before you've even made your point.
Wow.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Delivering the exact same data set with and without those qualifiers results in listeners rating the speaker's intelligence and authority entirely differently.
So it isn't just an internal confidence issue, it is a measurable credibility killer. And the taxonomy goes way beyond just how we introduce an idea. There's also the credit deflect, like someone compliments your work and your automatic knee-jerk response is, oh, it was nothing, or I just got lucky with the timing.
Right. And every single time you deflect, you are teaching both the room and your own nervous system that your contributions are fundamentally smaller than they actually are.
Yeah. And we also see this in the silence after interruption, like in our boardroom example, right? You're mid-sentence, someone talks over you, and you just stop. You yield the floor, probably telling yourself it's not worth making a scene.
Or the opinion softener. This is where you have a strong, well-researched view, but instead of stating it cleanly, you bury it under tentative language. Like, it sort of seems to me.
Right. The conviction is there, but the delivery just invites the room to dismiss it.
Exactly. And there is an entire physical dimension to this as well. The text calls it the physical contraction. We see crossed arms, folded posture, physically making the body take up less square footage.
Oh, I do that. The crossed arms thing.
A lot of people do. It also includes dropping your voice at the end of sentences so your statements sound like questions. Your physiology is essentially communicating, I am not sure I'm supposed to be here.
And finally, there's the ambition disguise. This is camouflaging what you actually want, because wanting something clearly feels dangerous. So it's saying, I'd love the opportunity if it suits the team, instead of just directly asking to lead the project.
Yeah, so we are painting a really vivid picture of behavior that actively undermines credibility here. So the obvious question becomes, if these behaviors are so damaging to our careers, why do we compulsively do them?
Right. Why self-sabotage?
Well, this is where we have to shift from the what to the why, because shrinking is not a character flaw. And it isn't a lack of intelligence, it is a deeply learned, genuinely adaptive response.
It's a survival mechanism.
Precisely. And it stems from three primary root causes. First, early conditioning. For many women, making yourself small was rewarded early in life, whether at home or in the classroom.
Right, to keep the peace.
Exactly. It avoided conflict. The quiet girl was praised as the good girl. The agreeable one was the safe one. So the brain's neural pathways learned a very simple, highly effective lesson. Shrinking keeps you safe, and your brain just keeps running that software long after the original childhood environment is gone.
Wow. And the second root cause, according to the source, is that loudness was actively punished. So the girl who was too confident or too opinionated wasn't called a leader. She was labeled bossy or too much or, difficult to work with.
Which is so common.
Right. And those labels become internalized cautionary tales that women carry directly into every boardroom and salary negotiation.
The third piece is the deeply ingrained good woman script. Society has long tied a woman's fundamental worth to how little she demands and how selfless she is. The ideal is accommodating, modest, and constantly attuned to the emotional comfort of others. So for many, this isn't just a social expectation. It becomes a core identity. Rewriting that script doesn't just feel like professional growth. It triggers a deep cognitive dissonance. It feels almost like a betrayal of who you are supposed to be.
Okay, wait, I'm struggling with this a little bit.
Yeah.
Because we know the double bind is real.
Oh, very real.
Yeah, there are mountains of documented research showing that women who behave assertively in professional settings are often heavily penalized in ways that men simply are not. Like, assertive men are viewed as visionary leaders, right? While assertive women are routinely labeled difficult or abrasive. So, if society genuinely penalizes women for taking up space, isn't shrinking just a highly logical, intelligent defense mechanism for the listener? Are we really asking them to put themselves in the line of fire when the corporate world still demonstrably punishes assertive women?
That is such a fair pushback. And honestly, it is the most vital question in this entire discussion. The research we're looking at does not shy away from the reality of the double bind. It validates that the penalty is documented, it's real, and it is deeply unfair.
Okay, so then why change?
Well, however, we have to look at the longitudinal data. The crucial nuance here is that women who persist in confident self-expression despite that initial social friction and pushback, they are ultimately more respected, more frequently promoted, and significantly more financially successful over the arc of their careers than those who shrink to avoid the short-term discomfort.
Oh, I see. So the reward exists, but it requires enduring that initial wave of resistance.
Yes, exactly. Understanding why you shrink is necessary. It provides compassion for yourself, recognizing that, hey, you are not broken, you are shaped by a system. But that understanding is not an excuse to keep doing it. What was shaped can be reshaped.
Okay, that makes sense. So we've established that shrinking destroys credibility in the boardroom and that pushing through the friction is necessary for professional survival. But the most terrifying part of this research, to me at least, isn't what happens at work. It's what happens when you take that same survival mechanism home.
Yeah, the bleed effect.
Exactly. Shrinking doesn't stay neatly confined to office hours. We see this massive bleed effect.
Because the neural pathways you reinforce at work, they don't just magically shut off at 5 p.m. A pattern of shrinking bleeds into every corner of your life. It systematically teaches you and everyone around you that your needs, your opinions, and your boundaries are negotiable, that they're secondary, optional.
There is a really powerful story in the source material about a woman named Nadia that perfectly illustrates this. So at work, Nadia consistently downplayed her contributions. She was passed over for promotion twice. Finally, in her exit interview, her manager looked at her and said, "We didn't realize how much you were doing. You never said." It is. But the real tragedy was the bleed effect at home. Nadia never asked for what she wanted in her relationship. She built her entire life around her partner's preferences. Every decision, where to eat, how to spend holidays, whose career took priority, was shaped around someone else's comfort.
And the psychological toll of that is a bone-deep exhaustion. I mean, she was expending a massive amount of cognitive energy every single day, making hundreds of micro-calculations about how to be invisible in her own life.
Yeah.
Nadia eventually realized she didn't even know what her own desires were anymore. And the relationship ended because she had effectively erased herself from it. In intimate relationships, whether that's romantic, family, or friendships, shrinking often wears a very noble disguise. We call it keeping the peace, or choosing our battles.
But there is a hard line between healthy compromise and self-erasure, isn't there? I mean, healthy compromise is two whole people adjusting. Self-erasure is when keeping the peace becomes your default state. It's when you are always the one swallowing a preference to avoid discomfort.
Yep.
It manifests as not expressing needs directly, and instead becoming quietly irritable. Or accepting far less than you deserve and calling it contentment, just quieting your own standards just to avoid the anxiety of asking for more.
It also looks like apologizing for having human emotions, saying, sorry, I'm being emotional, as if your feelings are an imposition rather than vital data, or making yourself intellectually smaller, purposely dimming your light so you don't threaten a partner or make them feel inadequate. This raises an important question. What is the underlying terror driving this?
Yeah, why go to those lengths?
If we strip away the rationalizations, the root fear is almost always a fear of abandonment. The internal monologue is basically, if I take up too much space, if I am too loud, too confident, or too demanding, people will leave. I will be rejected.
It's the fear that love and acceptance are entirely conditional on your smallness. But the research offers a vital litmus test for the people in your life. It says a relationship that requires you to shrink cannot sustain the full version of you. It is built around an edited, curated version of you, and maintaining that edit indefinitely will destroy your mental health. The right partnership actually asks you to be more, not less.
That's such a key takeaway. If you find that you cannot be fully yourself in a relationship, that is not a personal failing. It is crucial data about the capacity of that relationship.
So true. Okay, so we have this devastating, all-consuming bleed effect that impacts our careers, our relationships, and our own sense of self. How do we stop? How do we actually retrain that baseline?
Well, this brings us to the antidote, the practice of expansion.
Expansion, I love that word.
And the brilliant part of this is that just like shrinking lives and small daily choices, expansion lives there too. It's not about waking up tomorrow with a totally new, dominant personality.
Thank goodness, because that sounds exhausting.
Right. It is entirely about retraining your neurological baseline for comfort through micro-habits. Let's look at the actual 7 practices of taking up space from the text.
Let's do it.
It starts with the language of hesitation. Practice 1. When you replace apologies with acknowledgement, so swapping, sorry to bother you, with do you have a minute? You are literally rewiring how your brain frames your right to exist in that space. You shift from viewing yourself as an imposition to viewing yourself as a peer.
Oh, I love that. And you're doing the same thing when you strip the qualifiers out of your speech. That's practice too. Try writing your main point at the top of your meeting notes without any softeners. Instead of saying, I feel like maybe the data points to why, practice saying cleanly, the data shows why. It forces the room to grapple with your idea rather than your insecurity about the idea.
Yes, and then there's practice 3, the practice of receiving. When someone compliments your work, The instruction is to simply say thank you and stop talking.
The stopping talking part is the hardest.
It is. The instruction to stop talking is critical because your nervous system will literally scream at you to deflect, to fill the silence with a disclaimer about how the team helped. By holding the silence after a thank you, you are building a tolerance for positive recognition.
Okay, practice 4.
You also have to build a tolerance for holding the floor. When you are interrupted, you can calmly say, "I'd like to finish my thought." You aren't being rude. You are requiring basic professional courtesy.
Practice 5 is naming your idea, right? Like if an idea you suggested earlier is suddenly championed by someone else, name it. I'm glad that direction is gaining traction. That was the approach I suggested earlier. It's not petty, it's professional record keeping.
Exactly. And for practice 6, there's a physical dimension to retraining this baseline. It's paying attention to the inflection of your voice. Are you dropping your pitch at the end of a sentence so it sounds like a question? Keep your statements flat.
And finally, practice 7. Physically, sit at the center of the table, occupy the physical space, and your psychology will eventually catch up to your posture. So, okay, what does this all mean? I have to ask the obvious question here. If the listener starts doing all of this tomorrow, holding the floor, keeping their voice flat, claiming credit, sitting in the center seat, isn't there a very real risk they're just going to come off as arrogant or aggressive?
It's the most common fear associated with this work, absolutely. But the core insight of this research is that expansion is not arrogance. Arrogance is an inflation of the ego that requires diminishing others. Expansion is simply completeness.
Completeness.
Yes, saying "let me complete this point" isn't aggressive, it's a boundary. Women who stop shrinking don't suddenly become different, overbearing people. They just become more fully themselves, whole, present, and unapologetically occupying the exact amount of space they were always meant to fill.
And that deeper, quieter confidence is actually magnetic. It draws better opportunities and more authentic relationships because it isn't constantly seeking external validation. Which actually brings us to your homework for the listener. The source material gives us exact action steps to build this habit of expansion, starting where the stakes feel lowest. Here is your assignment for this week. First, audit your language for 1 full day. Don't try to change anything yet. Just count every apology, qualifier, and softener you use in your emails, Slack messages, and conversations.
Right, because that audit establishes your baseline. The second step is to choose just one habitual qualifier, like just or I think maybe, and surgically remove it from your vocabulary this week. Catch it before you type it or say it.
Third, receive the very next compliment you get fully. Let it land without a single deflection. Fourth, commit to holding the floor just once this week when someone tries to talk over you.
Fifth, identify one specific relationship in your life where you consistently shrink. You don't have to confront the person, but you need to honestly name the dynamic to yourself.
And finally, do one brave thing this week that the smaller version of you would have avoided. Pitch that idea. Ask for the center seat. Remember Nadia. Her journey toward expansion didn't start with a dramatic resignation letter. It started in a completely ordinary coffee catch-up. Instead of her usual accommodating whatever works best, she looked at her colleague and said, clearly and without a single apology, option A is the stronger choice, and here's why.
And the reaction is the most important part of that story. Her colleague just blinked, then nodded slowly and said, "That's actually a really good point." The sky didn't fall. Nobody punished her. She discovered, to her profound relief, that the space had been hers for the taking all along.
The world did not end. It just finally made room for her.
And that realization is really merely the baseline, because at the very end of the source material, there's a fascinating teaser for Chapter 9, which is titled Skipping the Negotiation Table.
Oh, that sounds good.
It's incredible. The data shows that women who learn to negotiate boldly don't just secure a higher salary today, they compound those earnings for the entirety of their careers. So it leaves us with a final provocative thought for the listener to mull over. If you can master the courage to stop shrinking in the small, daily micro moments today, what massive, life-changing negotiations will you be completely ready to win tomorrow?
Think about that boardroom chair near the door. Tomorrow, the center seat is yours. Take it.